Good evening. I am calling the May 6th, 2024 Parks and Natural Resources Commission meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Tonight's Parks and Natural Resources Commission meeting will be held in person and virtually by using Zoom. As chair, I will be leading tonight's meeting, and the public is welcome to participate when invited throughout the meeting. Members of the public may attend the meeting in person or join via Zoom online. If you experience any audio problems, we suggest you leave the meeting and then rejoin. This usually fixes the issue. Additional instructions on how to participate are posted online at burnsvillemn.gov in the public meeting calendar. As usual, tonight's meeting is available for viewing on BCTV and the city's website. If you are unable to participate this evening and would like to submit public testimony, I encourage you to email your comments to city staff or mail your comments directly to City Hall. You may also call the meeting at 651-372-8299. For each public hearing, I will open up a time when callers may speak to an item that will give more instructions at that time. Your call will be muted. Please note, there may be a slight delay due to the differences in technology. If speaking by phone, please mute your computer since there may be a delay. Now on to tonight's agenda. Our first item is adoption of the agenda. Do any members of the commission have any changes to the agenda? All right, staff, do you have any changes?
Nothing from staff.
Awesome. So do I have a motion for the adoption of tonight's agenda?
I so move.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, that motion carries. We'll move on to approval of the minutes. Consider approval of April 15th, 2024 Parks and Natural Resources Commission meeting minutes. Commissioners, are there any changes to the minutes? No changes. Staff, any changes?
Nothing from staff.
All right, all in favor to approve the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
I missed a step.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
A second.
I second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? I did it right that time. All right, now we move on to citizen comments. Are there any members of the public on Zoom who wish to speak?
I am not seeing anybody, Madam Chair.
All right, since there is no one, we will move on to the annual State of the Lakes report on surface water quality. Caleb Ashling, please come and join us. Tell us all about the water.
Thank you. All right. My name is Caleb Ashling. I'm a natural resources specialist with the city of Burnsville, and every year we come and present the State of the Lakes presentation, which is basically an update on water quality in Burnsville, especially focused on our 8 priority lakes that we have here in town. So just a quick reminder on how water flows through Burnsville. There are 3 major watersheds in town. One is the Credit River watershed, which is in southwest Burnsville. That's green on the map, so that area drains to the Credit River. In east central Burnsville, we have the Vermilion River watershed, and the main water body that's a part of that is Lake Alamagnet, so that's the area in orange. And then the Minnesota River watershed is the main drainage through Burnsville, so that's the area in tan that covers the majority of the city. And a number of our lakes are connected through a chain of storm drain pipes that flow from Lac La Vanne to Keller Lake, on to Crystal Lake, over to the Twin Lakes, where it joins water from Wood Pond, over to Early Lake, Sunset Pond, Kramer Nature Preserve, and then on to the Minnesota River. So that's a major drainage area through town, and then other parts of town do drain through pipes and various ponds to get down to the Minnesota River Valley as well. And then, most of the water that's draining through town is draining through storm sewer pipes. So those storm drains that you see on the street are connected to underground pipes that go under the streets and roadways. There's 185 miles of storm sewers in town, 6,500 storm drains. So it's a pretty massive network of pipes and drains that connect water and move it off the landscape to prevent flooding. And those pipes are connected to nearly 300 ponds as well as our lakes. So there's a lot of different pipes and ponds that are part of our storm drainage system. And that storm drainage system works really well to prevent flooding. It does also mean that our roads, our lawns are all connected fairly quickly to our ponds and lakes. And when it rains, it's going to carry fertilizer, sediment into the street, down the storm drain, and into ponds and lakes, which can cause water quality pollution. So I'm going to talk a little bit about water quality in two different ways tonight. The first is in comparison to state water quality standards. Then I'm also going to talk about water quality in comparison to our city goals and our water resources plan. So for state water quality standards, the biggest way we look at water quality is the levels of phosphorus, chlorophyll A, which is a measure of algae in the water, and water clarity. And there are different standards for our shallower lakes, which is the majority of our lakes here in Burnsville, as well as our deeper lakes, which is primarily Crystal Lake here. And phosphorus is really kind of the fuel that algae needs to grow. So when you have higher levels of phosphorus in a lake, that means there's going to be more algae, more green, and more potential for fish kills and other water quality issues. So if a lake is considered impaired by the state if it fails to meet 2 or more water quality standards over a 10-year period, Burnsville currently has 2 impaired waters on the state list. That's Alamagnet Lake and Keller Lake. And then we've had 2 lakes removed from the impaired waters list because they've improved enough to be removed. The most recent was Crystal Lake in 2018. Early Lake was also removed prior to that. So just looking a little bit at the city's water resources master plan clarity goals. All of the city's goals for clarity are more difficult or more stringent than the state standards. So volunteers are measuring water clarity throughout all of our 8 lakes listed here. They go out about every other week, April through October. They're measuring lowering what's called a Secchi disc into the water. It's black and white. They lower it down until they can't see it anymore. That's the reading for clarity on that particular time out. And then every time they go out, they average those readings together, and we get an average for the season. And this table here shows the 3-year average for each water body and the goal. I think I have so just highlighting our impaired waters, you can see for Alamagnet Lake, we had this is in meters, 1 meter 3-year average clarity, which is better than the long-term trend, so that's pretty positive. We're still a little short of the 1.3 meter goal there. Keller Lake, we have 1.4 meter clarity 3-year average, which is above the goal for the city clarity as well as the state standard. So both of those lakes are seeing improvement for clarity. Then in general, the other water bodies in town are the Crystal, Early, Lac Lavon, and Wood Pond are all meeting the city clarity goals. Sunset Pond and South Twin Lake are a little under the clarity goals over the last year or two, but in general, they've been meeting those previous to that. Then before I start looking at the phosphorus levels for each lake, I just wanted to also highlight that a big topic for folks who live or recreate on lakes the last couple of years has been low lake levels. So we've had a number of years of drought, and a lot of folks have been having difficulties getting the boat off the dock, getting into shallow areas of lakes where they normally could get their boat in. This is a picture of Keller Lake. We have a staff gauge, which we can measure water depth, lake depth with. And you can see I think this was late summer last year's dry where the staff gauge is. The water is a little ways past that. The lake levels have been low, and that's been a challenge for folks to use the lakes the last couple of years. It has resulted in more native emergent vegetation. When water levels come down, it does create more opportunity for emergent plants. The picture on the right here is a bulrush, which is a native wetland plant. And we are seeing more growth of those shoreline vegetation plants, which in the long term is good for water quality. So hopefully we can get water levels back up, and with some increased emergent plants, we might be in a better water quality situation long term. So now just taking a look at our lakes and their phosphorus levels relative to state standards. So Lake Alamagnet, which is one of those impaired waters, had one of the better, close to the best phosphorus year, or low phosphorus levels in the last 20 years. So for this bar chart, lower is better. The orange line is the state standard. So we were right at the state standard this last year, which is good. And in general, trending downward over the last 8 years or so.
Why so much change from year to year?
It can be a number of factors. A lot of it can be runoff. So if there's a lot of rain, for some lakes that will mean more phosphorus washing into the lake. For other lakes, it might be better if it is a smaller drainage area. So for Lake Alamagnet, I think for the lack of rain has probably prevented a lot of nutrient runoff into the lake and had better water clarity in those years.
Yep. Yeah.
And then there's other factors, just winter severity, ice off, other factors that can kind of drive those changes too. But runoff is a big one.
So what does the phosphorus come from?
Yeah, so it can come from a lot of different places, but it can be bound up in sediment. So if there's erosion and that's washing into the lake, that sediment contains phosphorus usually, and then it can be released in the lake. But basically any other green material, so if there's grass clippings, if there's leaves, all that stuff also contains phosphorus in it, and it breaks down in the lake, and then that phosphorus can be released. Then people also add phosphorus or nitrogen by fertilizing, and when that runs off into the lake, that adds more phosphorus.
Do you have a feel for which of those is most contributory, or does it differ completely lake by how close those are to residential areas, how close those are to woodlands? Do we have any idea of that?
I'm not sure offhand.
Okay.
I think they're all major contributors, so I couldn't tell you for sure without a little research ahead of time.
And does having I forgot what that space between you, like an easement between like someone's yard and the lake, having, I don't know, native plants or something growing there help with that runoff?
Yes, yeah, I would call that like a shoreline buffer along a lake. And those are really beneficial because if there is erosion occurring, or maybe there is fertilizer use as it's running off the turf grass, if this is a lakeshore property, it does kind of get captured in some of that native vegetation before it reaches the lake. So it acts kind of like a filter or buffer before some of that pollution can get to the lake. So those are really beneficial, and the city actually has a grant program to promote the installation of those shoreline buffers.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so just to highlight, some lakes I've highlighted a few projects of interest. So on Alamagnet Lake, we do have more activities going on there since it is in impaired waters. Last year, we had an alum feasibility study that was completed. This is a project that's led by the Vermilion River Joint Powers Organization and partnered by the cities of Apple Valley and Burnsville as well. Alum is aluminum sulfate. It's a product that can be added to water. It binds with phosphorus both in the water column, but also once it precipitates down to the soil, phosphorus is released over time into the water column as it's broken down, and it binds with phosphorus over time as it's released as well. So it's a good way to deal with what they call the internal load of phosphorus in a lake, the phosphorus that's already in there and just cycling throughout the lake. So a study was completed and to identify the cost and the feasibility of treating Alamagnet Lake with alum. And once the study was completed, the Vermilion River Watershed applied for a Clean Waters grant. And that grant was received, so they have $287,000 to conduct an alum treatment on Alamagnet Lake. And right now they're in the process of developing a bid package and getting quotes to conduct that work. The plan is to do one round of treatment this fall, and then another round most likely next year, or possibly the year after that. Then Lac Lavon is in southwest or southeast Burnsville. Lac Lavon is an old gravel pit and has an extremely small watershed, mostly just the park and homes directly adjacent drain to it. Between being an old gravel pit and having a small watershed, it has really, really good water clarity and phosphorus levels. So you can see we're well below the standard for phosphorus levels on Lac Lavon. So one of the better lakes in the metro for water quality. Keller Lake is kind of next in the chain. For phosphorus levels, the last 5 years we've been below the state standards for shallow lakes. So that's been a really good improvement and a good sign for the long-term possibilities of Keller Lake getting off the impaired waters list. There's been a lot of watershed work to prevent phosphorus from flowing into the lake, so that's a big part of this. And then it's kind of an example of what alum treatments can do. In 2019, there was an alum treatment, and you can see a very clear difference in the phosphorus levels since that time. And that did have a second round of treatment in 2021 as well. Alum treatments are often applied in 2 different years to enhance the benefit, and also if you apply too much at one time, you can affect the pH levels, so they split them into 2 different doses. So on Keller Lake, we've been working on aquatic plant reintroduction. Keller Lake has a lot of invasive aquatic plants like Eurasian water milfoil and curly-leaf pondweed, but very, very few native aquatic plants. So we've been working with other folks around the metro area who are doing similar projects to reintroduce native submerged aquatic plants into the lake. And this upcoming season will be our 3rd year of doing that. We've been doing it every other year the last couple of years. And then we also have a fish survey plan to assess the impacts of the fish population out on Keller Lake on water quality. Crystal Lake is the biggest lake and by far the most well-used recreational water body in Burnsville. And Crystal Lake, as I mentioned, came off the impaired waters list in 2018, and we've seen a good water quality continuing since that time. So we're meeting the phosphorus standards here, also meeting the city's clarity goals. So things have been going well on Crystal Lake. And then we do have some different projects going on this upcoming year. So we, for a number of years, have received a grant from the county to do increased boat inspections. So we have a contractor that we work with the county on that is at the boat launch at Crystal Lake on the busy time periods over Friday through Sunday throughout the summer. And they're inspecting boats coming in that could potentially bring in zebra mussels or other invasive species. They're also inspecting boats as they come out. Then we also have some early detection surveys planned. That's just looking around the boat launch area to see if they can catch something like a zebra mussel infestation early on, since that's where zebra mussels would likely come in first. Searching around the boat launch area is a good way to focus your attention on a likely infestation area. Then we also annually harvest curly-leaf pondweed, which is an invasive plant on Crystal Lake. And this is a picture of an aquatic plant harvester. So they'll harvest about 40 or so acres out there each year, depending on the year. And that helps control invasive species and also improves recreation on the lake.
Where does the harvested plant go?
It's taken onto the machine and then offloaded onto a trailer, and then it goes down to the city compost site.
Is that weed that kind of floats around in that lake?
It's definitely one of them. There's probably
seaweed?
a few different ones, but curly-leaf pondweed is up really early in the season, and it grows to the water surface usually by mid-June, late June, and then it dies back in the middle of the season. And it can, as it dies back, can release phosphorus into the water column, which is thought to contribute to some algae blooms. So that's one of the reasons why it's more of a focus species for control for us. And then Twin Lake, Twin Lake South specifically, is a small lake that is the water that's directly connected to receiving the drainage from Crystal Lake. And for a small lake, it has good water quality, and we've been meeting the state standards for a long time out there. Kind of interestingly, it had a little worse water quality the last couple years, so kind of the reverse of some other lakes we have. A lot of its water typically comes from Crystal Lake, because Crystal Lake's been so low, it hasn't been draining out. So it hasn't been receiving some of that lower phosphorus drainage from Crystal Lake as much the last couple of years, resulting in some higher phosphorus levels, but still below the standards. Wood Pond is another small water body, kind of in east central southeast Burnsville. Well below state standards for phosphorus there. This is another water body that received an alum treatment. This one was fall of 2018. And again, you can really see a positive change in the water quality following that alum treatment. And we're still seeing good benefit from that alum treatment currently. Early Lake is a shallow water body in the southwest part of Burnsville. We're meeting state standards out there, though it has kind of bounced up and down the last, or throughout the history, but still at or below the state standards out there. Then lastly, Sunset Pond. Last year was below the state standards for water quality. We have seen 2 years over the last 10-year period where it was above the phosphorus state standard. So that's something that we'll continue to keep an eye on and see what the long-term trend out there seems to be. Yeah, and with that, I'd take any questions that you have.
I'm curious how people who live around lakes can find out about the grant if they didn't. Yeah, how does the word get out?
Yeah, so we have a few different ways. One is through the Burnsville Bulletin. There's usually an announcement in the winter and spring issues of the Bulletin or the city newsletter. It's also on our website. Then if folks want to sign up for the email alerts, the GovDelivery email alert system, there's a section on there, I believe it's titled Environmental, or an option to get kind of emails related to environmental issues or topics. And that's a great way, because we always send out an announcement well in advance of the grant deadline for that program.
Is that used? Is it used a lot? Is it used a little? I mean, would you consider that program successful?
Yes, the grant program?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, yeah. A lot of years we use all of the funding. Most years we use the majority of it.
Okay.
So there's always a decent number of applicants.
That's great. That's great.
And that grant program funds shoreline restorations. Also, rain gardens are another big project that grant will fund, and then sometimes native plant gardens as well.
I don't know that your specific department is responsible for this, but 185 miles of storm sewers within Burnsville. Who keeps eyes on how those, are they in good condition? How are we keeping up with that? We know that water is making it from one point to another. Is that not natural resources? Would that be infrastructure? Who manages that 185 miles of storm sewer?
Yeah, it's a combination between our streets department doing inspections on storm sewers, storm outlets, as well as our engineering department doing studies when there needs to be inspections or potentially repairs and replacements.
Perfect, thank you. It just seems like a big responsibility, because if those aren't working, then the water's not going to get from point A to point B, so
Yep.
thank you.
Yeah, it's a
Just
major
curious.
undertaking.
Yep.
On that same line, is there a way to like filter out what comes out of there before it hits the lakes?
Yes, yep, and there's a number of different ways that that's done. One of the most common ways is the storm ponds. So I mentioned there's 300 ponds around town. And a lot of times water will drain to a storm pond before it drains to a lake. When it gets to the storm pond, it's gonna settle out some of the phosphorus, some of the sediment, which results, when it outlets the pond, then it's cleaner than when it came in, and so the water going to the lake is gonna be cleaner. So those ponds help trap the phosphorus and also make sediment removal easier when we have to do sediment cleanouts. And then for some of the impaired lakes where we need to remove even more phosphorus, we have some large rain gardens that are around. We have some iron infiltration trenches. It's kind of an enhanced way that water can filter through and bind with phosphorus. So there's a number of different best management practices that you can add to kind of enhance water quality or phosphorus removal before it gets to the lakes.
You showed the direction of the water through the lakes. That is through storm drains, so that's not a naturally occurring runoff, correct?
Correct, yep.
Okay, just curious.
Yep.
So you do that's solely to prevent excessive flooding?
Yes, yep, to get the water off the landscape to somewhere where it's not going to cause damage.
Okay.
It likely follows a somewhat similar pattern to where it would naturally drain, just so you're not working against the topography, but it's not the exact pattern it probably would take.
Okay.
In terms of the drought, how are we doing this year?
So far, better. So the lakes are up to about normal condition or maybe a little above normal, and we have some rain in the forecast this week. So we're off to a pretty good start. We'll just have to see what happens the next month or so.
Good. And then my last question is, because I cannot remember this, and I don't know if you said it, so I apologize. How long until a lake is removed from that impaired waters list?
Yeah, so it's not an exact process for that, but it has to meet the standards for at least 2 years over a number of samples. But working with the state, they also look at the long-term trend to make sure they're not going to remove a lake and then have to put it back on immediately. So it's kind of a combination. So at least 2 years of meeting those standards over, say, 8 or so paired samples. But usually you want to look at a longer average than that or more years than that to make sure you're getting the right trend and it's definitely going to be meeting those standards for a long period of time.
Perfect. And then a selfish question, how does Burnsville's impaired waters rate to other cities in Minnesota?
I guess I'm not sure. My focus is really in Burnsville. There are a lot of impaired waters, especially in the metro area, just because of the pollution runoff from the storm drain systems. So we're not alone in having impaired waters, and I think the fact that we've had several removed is a really positive sign for the water quality here in Burnsville.
Congratulations on all your hard work. I mean, listening to this, how everything is so tied together. So your job is really big, and congratulations for the fine work you're doing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we have a good natural resources team. I should also mention we work with the Black Dog Watershed, and I mentioned the Vermilion River Watershed, Dakota County Soil and Water Conservation District. So there's a nice team. Also, Crystal Lake Association and some other lakes that have groups that help protect their own water quality at the lake. So there's a lot of folks that kind of come together to make it happen.
It is exciting though, year after year, to see more positive, because it's been trending since I've been on this commission in a very positive light, so that it's really exciting to see that.
Yes, definitely.
Any other questions, commissioners? All right, well, thank you so much for the update and the information. Should we move right on to deer management?
Yes.
Now for something completely different.
But it's all connected, remember?
They are.
All right. So yeah, I've got the next presentation as well. I'm here to give kind of our update or annual report on the city's deer management program. So some of you commissioners have heard this before if you've been on the commission for a bit. Others, this may be new to you. So the city recommended that a deer management program be created in the 1999 Natural Resources Master Plan. That deer management plan was adopted by City Council in 2001. And one of the things that did was set the population density goal for deer in Burnsville. So we had a population number to target, as well as some strategies for population control. The deer management program is intended to address a few different concerns related to deer in suburban environments. One is deer vehicle collisions. So if you have a high deer population, you're going to have more deer vehicle collisions, which is obviously bad for people and for deer. It's also intended to address negative impacts to natural areas. So if you have a high deer population, those deer are really focusing a lot of their feeding on small natural areas where it can be detrimental to native tree regeneration, other native plants in the ground cover areas. Then we have more issues with landscape depredation when the deer population is high, and also increased risk of disease spread in the population. So what I'm doing tonight is reporting on the past program year, the 23-24 program year, and then also making recommendations for the upcoming program year, so 24-25. And each program year runs from April 1st of the previous year to March 31st of the current year. So there's a few different components of the deer management program. One is education, also the feeding ban, feeding ordinance. Another is monitoring the population, and then population control. So for education, we do have a website with information about deer. It links to our plan, and we also provide updates on management activities. Then we do periodically try to put notices in the Burnsville Bulletin, the city newsletter, especially about the deer feeding ordinance. Then also use social media and other tools to get the word out about deer and deer issues. And so in Burnsville, there has been an ordinance in place for a long time that does not allow the feeding of deer. There also now is a county level ordinance that covers the whole county due to CWD, chronic wasting disease, being present in the county. So you can't feed deer in Burnsville. We did not receive any reports of feeding violations this past year, which is a good thing. Just in general, we'd recommend just continuing to monitor for those violations when they occur. If we do have issues that pop up, we send letters to the properties, just notifying them of the ordinance. Then we re-inspect the properties in 10 days, and that's almost always enough to fix the issue. Then on to the monitoring component. So there's two different ways we track the deer population or deer impacts. One is through aerial counts, and one is car deer crashes. So for monitoring, we look at the city in 6 different zones. The northeast, northwest, west central, east central, southwest, and southeast zone. So I'll present some of these numbers according to those zones. And so there was no aerial count that was able to be conducted this past winter due to the lack of snow. You need a good amount of snow depth for at least a decent period of time to get up and do an aerial count. So that has happened before periodically. So when that happens, we just go work based off our most recent aerial count. And the aerial counts are conducted by the Three Rivers Park District, so we partner with them on this. They also fly Murphy-Hanrahan Park, Bloomington Park, sometimes other areas for other cities. And they're flying by helicopter. And this is a picture taken from a helicopter. So if there is snow cover, in good conditions, the deer are pretty readily visible from the helicopter. And since we don't have an aerial count to work off of for this year, what we do is basically use our count from February 7th, 2023, and then we do a projection based off that for fawn birth, and then we use that for our population estimates for this fall. We also add in, so the projected population for last fall was 141 deer, and then we factor in any sharpshooting removals, archery hunt removals, which I'll talk about later on in the presentation, as well as vehicle crashes, which I'll also talk about that occurred after the aerial survey. And from that, we have an estimated population that we can use of 68 deer, kind of in lieu of an aerial survey. Then another way we monitor the population or impacts is by tracking deer car crashes in Burnsville. We get police records from our police department that are related to deer, and then we can map those records to see where there were vehicle collisions with deer. Then the city also contracts with a company for animal control, and they do carcass pickups for deer. So that information is also provided to me, and then we cross-reference those reports and remove any overlapping reports. And from those two sources, we can put together a map of the crashes in Burnsville. And this is the minimum number. We know some do go unreported. So the total was 51 deer vehicle collisions this past year, 2023. That's slightly down from what we had the previous year, 53, down from historical highs before the program of 70 to 80 per year. Common areas for vehicle collisions were in southwest Burnsville, southeast Burnsville, as well as some in east central Burnsville as well. So we recommend continuing with these annual monitoring methods this upcoming season. Then on to population control. So we have two different ways that we conduct population control in Burnsville. One is through archery hunting, and the other is through sharpshooting with the Burnsville Police Department. For the archery program, we encourage archery hunting on private property where possible. There are not a ton of areas where that's possible in Burnsville, but there are some larger lots in southwest Burnsville where archery hunting is feasible due to ordinance or other large commercial lots, especially in other parts of town. Then we do also operate archery hunts on public land where possible, especially at Kelleher Park. And this past season, we again worked with the Metro Bow Hunters Resource Space. That's a nonprofit organization that organizes kind of close quarters archery hunts in suburban parks. And they helped us run a hunt at Kelleher Park, and there were 3 deer harvested through that hunt. Adjacent to Kelleher Park is Murphy-Hanrahan Park Reserve, which is managed by the Three Rivers Park District. They also had a hunt run by the Metro Bow Hunters group, and they had 43 deer harvested in their hunt. Only 10% of that park is in Burnsville, so we consider about 4 deer to be removed as far as our population tracking. Then for our sharpshooting program, we utilize the Burnsville Police Department sharpshooters. And we conducted sharpshooting in northeast and east central, the east central management units this past winter. We had a successful sharpshooting season. We were out 5 nights for sharpshooting, and there were 36 deer harvested. So just comparing our removal goals to the actual harvest for this past program year. So in the units where we were conducting work, the southwest unit, we could remove up to 13 deer, and there were 7 deer removed in that unit. That was through archery hunting. In the northeast unit, we could remove up to 22 deer. There were 17 deer harvested in the northeast area. And then in the east central unit, we could remove up to 23. There were 19 deer harvested there for a total of 43 deer harvested. Then on to recommended harvest for this upcoming program year. So there is a potential to conduct some harvest in the southwest and northeast units. But because the population from our last aerial survey was fairly low and we had a successful sharpshooting season this past winter, there isn't a need to conduct any sharpshooting or archery hunts this upcoming year. So we're not recommending any management this upcoming season. So yeah, no sharpshooting is recommended this winter. And we're not recommending an archery hunt at Kelleher Park this winter either. And then again, that's just based on the population goals for each management unit that's laid out in the plan. And then the Three Rivers Park District, which is a separate organization, their own park system, they will be hosting an archery hunt at Murphy-Hanrahan Park Reserve. Because a small portion of their park is within the city limits. To hunt in that area, it does require City Council adopting a resolution to approve those special hunts. So we'd also request the commissioners recommend council adopt the resolution. And the hunt dates for Murphy-Hanrahan are October 11th through the 13th and November 15th through the 17th. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
So for the archery hunts, is it open to the public and they just have to come and say that that's what they're going to be doing? And
Yeah, it's a lot more structured than that, so it is for good reason, yeah. Yeah, so you have to become a member of the organization, and the Metro Bow Hunters Resource Base organization, which is this nonprofit group. There are some sharpshooting or archery hunting proficiency tests that you have to do to be able to participate in the hunts, and then you submit a request to be in hunts. There's hunts all over the metro area. Sometimes you have to submit multiple times before you might get your most preferred hunt. But that's kind of how it works. So it is very structured. We know who's going to be hunting, and generally they have stand locations designated, so you know who's going to be hunting in what stand. So it's very organized.
interesting.
You have a deer population goal of 146. Where did that number come from?
Yeah, so the goal that was created in the plan is based off preferred deer habitat. So basically areas of Burnsville, our park system, the river valley that can support a deer herd without really detrimental effects to the natural area. So it takes the number of acreage in each management unit, and then there's a population goal of 15 to 25 deer per square miles of that preferred deer habitat. So basically
okay.
just a calculation based on that amount of habitat.
So I noticed in southeast Burnsville, you stated the deer population was 0. Just so you know, the other evening I had 3 wander through my backyard. So there's at least 3 there. So I guess my question from that is, are those, because you're trying to manage this population, is it helpful to have that information passed along to somebody? Or do we, to help know, I mean, if you miss them on an aerial survey, obviously you're going to miss them. So is it helpful to have that kind of information passed on?
Yes, yeah, we do have a deer management report form on the website where people can submit that information. For our population control efforts, we base that off aerial survey numbers, so that doesn't necessarily change our removal strategies. And the aerial surveys, we always know, are kind of a minimum count, and there are going to be deer missed. And southeast Burnsville in particular is a challenge because there are some areas outside of Burnsville into the Apple Valley, where some of those deer will move sometimes during the winter. So we know sometimes deer get missed. We do have to kind of go with the minimum number that our counts provide, so we're not over harvesting or anything like that.
How much do they migrate? I mean, do they stay generally in one specific area, or are they going from city to city and taking a trip to Maple Grove, through the winter? Like, how much do they move?
They definitely move some. I don't think they're going up to Maple Grove, but I'm sure we know there are some that move between Apple Valley and Burnsville. I think there's probably a decent amount of movement between cities like that, and within Burnsville they are moving back and forth some. But I think the core of the population is probably staying within the management zones. They're kind of bounded by some major roadways that make it challenging to move. So I think the core population for each different section is probably staying around where it is. And then there may be some groups that are periodically kind of moving amongst the different zones or outside the city boundary.
I'm assuming, knowing some animals, I guess, in the state of Minnesota, there really isn't a natural predator for deer here, correct?
There are coyotes.
Okay.
They're not maybe the best deer predator or most successful deer predator, but they definitely can take down fawns. So they're probably the main deer predator here. And then the other, there are, as I mentioned, a lot of vehicle collisions that can occur. So that is another way that deer are killed in Burnsville.
Any other questions? All right, so the city is needing a vote to recommend the current deer management, or recommend the changes to the deer management program with, now I'm totally blanking what it was. I apologize.
Special archery date.
Yeah, to authorize, recommend the city council adopt the resolution for special hunts.
Thank you.
Specifically Murphy-Hanrahan Park, the section within Burnsville.
And no sharps shooting this year.
Correct.
There we go. Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
A second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? All right, it passes 100%.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here tonight.
you.
Caleb.
Our next meeting is scheduled for June 3rd, 2024, tentatively. And I believe that will be our water treatment tour, or are we meeting here on that
Yes,
date?
Commissioners, you will meet here at City Hall on June 3rd, and then you'll carpool or caravan over to the water treatment plant for your tour. I'm told the tour is about a half hour, 40 minutes, and then however long you have questions for our Public Works Director and Water Treatment Superintendent. And you will adjourn from there. There's no formal, gathering of the meeting or any of that, so.
Sounds good. Anything else from staff for this evening?
Nothing else from staff. I shouldn't say that. You have a volunteer appreciation dinner or gathering later this week. If you haven't seen that or haven't responded to that email, please do so.
Thank you. With that, I would like to request a call for adjournment of the May 6th, 2024 Parks and Natural Resources Commission meeting. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Perfect. Well, enjoy your beautiful evening, everybody. Thank you.